Welcome back, viewers. You're joined now with myself, Shea Burton. We've got Ross Gilbert there. We have navigated ourselves away from the prize wall, and for good reason, because this top four game right now is honestly very, very stacked.
Oh, we've got an absolute corker for you. We've got Nico Alabas, a former international champion, against Tord Reklev, a former, I think he's won an international championship or two in his time. We have two of the very, very best players in Europe, and we can have a look at the bracket here to see how they got here, and we can see that Tord Reklev did get that 2-1 victory against Joelle D'Alandrino, and Nico Alabas got that 2-0 victory against Lawrence van Brecht. And then on the other side of the bracket, we saw Bernardo Diaz falling to Vinny Schelfhout 2-1, and the stream game we had where Stefan Ivanov managed to get that improbable victory against Oliver Barnett in some weird games.
Yeah, some real interesting matchups there, and that's what's going to happen when you get into Top Cut, right? All the matches are going to be interesting. They're all going to be, you know, very rarely runaway victories. All these players have navigated these decks to a top finish, you know, most of them knocking in 10 wins now already. So, yeah, it's going to be some real good Top Cut action, and this matchup right now, oh my goodness.
Yeah, of course, we've seen both of these players on stream already, but for anyone that needs a reminder, Nico is playing the Arceus Duraludon list, very straightforward, literally just playing Arceus and Duraludon, and then Lugia for Tord. It's a bit of a different Lugia list. You know, if we look at the trainer line, it is very, very streamlined, as Joe was talking about earlier. We've got a bit more energy than we'd usually expect. We've still got some of these more, you know, interesting Pokemon, your amazing rare Eviltal, your Radiant Charizard, your amazing rare Raikou, your Stoutland. These things we see in Lugia quite a lot, but it is a little more streamlined and a little more consistent because Tord has gone for, I will set up.
Yeah. And I think that's normally a safe proposition for a lot of players, right? Just saying, right, let me get rid of all the fluff, you know, all the extra stuff that I won't use every game. Let me just fill my deck with cards that I will use every game. And, you know, Tord has always been a proponent of that, not really often playing many tech cards and or options. And it's hard to argue with him. Got 4 IC wins under his belt, 1 in each region. But worth noting that some of those cards that Tord isn't playing would have been extremely helpful against Duraludon.
Absolutely. We do have a top 8 meta breakdown to have a look at for you here, so you can see that it is not Lugia. There was a Lugia in the top 8. That is, of course, Tord. And then we saw the big deck was actually that Hisuian Gudra.
Yeah, and who would have said that? Hisuian Gudra being the most played deck in top 8. And I think if you said that to you before the event, you'd be like, what are you on about? And only 1 Lugia, 1 Arceus Duraludon, 1 Arc Intel with the Beedrill, obviously, and then 2 Mew. So very strange. You're looking at the conversion there for the Lost Box, the Gudra, sorry, into top 8 with 3 is absolutely insane.
Yeah, you can see that the meta for top 8 looks a little bit different to the meta for day 2. Lugia has been brought right down. We don't even have room to put Arceus on the graphic anymore because Gudra is taking over, and you've got to think, you know, we saw Stefan Ivanov came through top 8 with that deck. It is clearly a very good choice. And, well, as we've mentioned already, if Lugia is going to repeat the success of the past few weeks, if it's going to be taking down another tournament, it's going to have to be Tord. This is not what we saw last weekend. It's not a Lugia party anymore. This is a lot more open.
Yeah, I wonder if there's ever been such a drastic swing week from week, right? Because I think last week or the week before, there was Natal and then Vancouver.
They were both last weekend.
Yeah, both last weekend. And both tournaments, even though operating in different parts of the world, had 6 Lugias in each of their top 8. So to go from 6 in top 8 all the way down to 1, what a drastic swing.
Yeah, unfortunately, and that's what happens. A lot of people are going after the Lugia deck. That's what's really important here. They are trying to make sure that the Lugia deck is not going to be winning. So that's what we see sometimes. And then there's other players who go, well, everyone's prepped for Lugia. Maybe I need something a little bit different. Maybe Lugia's got too big of a target on its back. Tord, of course, is like, nah. I'm going to go full Lugia. But we've got 2 players here. And, you know, winning an international championship is extremely difficult. To have a matchup of players, both of whom have done it, that is a very big deal. And these players have both been around for many years. They know each other very well at this stage.
Yeah, good friends. And you can see a little bit of banter, I would imagine, as I imagine Tord won the coin flip. You just see Tord immediately saying, yep, I'll go first, please. You can tell they're going to have a fun game of Pokemon trading cards. And let's not always forget, even if you are in the top 4 of a special we're all here to have fun at the end of the day, and I just love seeing both these players with smiles on their faces.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not having fun, you're doing something a little bit wrong. It's a game at the end of the day. The clue is in the name. It's supposed to be something we enjoy playing. So, I mean, as we head on into this matchup, we know what Lugia does. Arceus Duraludon is far more straightforward. It is use Lugia, set up Duraludon, smash with Duraludon, and of course we have that Skyscraper ability that prevents all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks to your opponent's Pokemon that have any special energy attached. And Tord has a deck which is entirely special energy, so we're gonna have to get a little more creative. He's not gonna just be able to sit there and smash as you would in some other matchups. We are gonna have to see a little more playing around, going after the bench, playing with some other attacks that we don't usually go with here. Because, of course, if all you're doing is just, you know, running into the Duraludon, well, you're not going to have a great time with a deck that very literally plays no basic energy.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the sort of Tord list now sort of reminds me of how Lugia was during the LAIC time, which, you know, he won the event with, by the way, where he didn't have any outs to Duraludon. There was no Lost Vacuum. There was, and then there was also no cancelling clone. So that would imply, at least on face value, if Nico can develop Duraludon plus Big Parasol, that Duraludon isn't going to go anywhere. So I'm intrigued to see how Tord navigates this matchup and if he has any game plans for that scenario, because at least on face value, that seems like a pretty bad proposition for Tord.
And it is, oh, 2 Duraludon VMAX in the prizes. There are 3, but there's also 2 Boss's Orders. I am not liking Nico's prizes here, but it is a 2-free list like we see so often with these Duraludon decks. So there is still a Duraludon VMAX available as we head into game 1. It looks like the players are ready to go now. We see the customary fist bump, big smiles, and it looks like Tord is going to be going first here with that Lugia in the active.
Yes, I mean, I guess looking at Nico's prize there, you know, does have access to Mustard as well, so we could see the other Duraludon getting flung into play that way. But let's see what Tord has here. So in Evolution Incense, we see not a great deal, actually. It's a Quick Ball and an Evolution Incense, and I think that's a Luminio on that gorgeous Crown Zenith one, I believe.
Yep.
And I imagine this Evolution Incense will get Tord rocking off here, gonna get an Archeops, and then Quick Ball it away.
Yeah, that is absolutely the play turn 1. It is also worth pointing out that Nico has a couple of annoying stadiums, including a Temple of Sinnoh.
Yeah.
Tord has no stadiums. And Tord has no Lost Vacuum or anything like that.
Wow.
Of course, both Lugia V and Lugia V-Star have an attack which does discard a stadium in play, but that is going to be a little bit awkward because it's going to turn off all the extra effects of Tord's special energy until such time as he actually is able to attack with Lugia and get rid of that stadium. That is something else to watch as we go through this game. He does, I should mention, have a single copy of Pumpkaboo, which obviously has that Pumpkin Pit ability to buff the stadium off. But again, this is not usually what we're looking for here. There is no actual counter stadium, so Tord is going to have to work that little bit harder to get rid of it and either attack or use a bench space.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. I'm just intrigued. Like, Tord doesn't have any outs for Duraludon here, so I'm intrigued to see, you know, Tord has to just hope that Nico doesn't set up. But, you know, to be fair, Arceus Duraludon, we did see in one of the rounds, in one of the games, it has got limited search, limited dig outside of Starbirth, obviously, so maybe Tord can just try and rush Nico out of this game. I think if you go in second, if you're Nico, you want to try and get down 2 Arceuses here, so you can always have access to Starbirth if one of them gets KO'd, which it most likely will. And then Tord's defense against Duraludon is going to have to just be amazing destruction, but then Nico has the counter to the counter by having Big Parasol as well.
Absolutely, of course, Duraludon VMAX, it must be noted, only prevents damage, it doesn't prevent effects, so Evil Tao can just get a KO. However, Big Parasol will prevent effects of attacks, which will stop the KO. So Tord here, he's got the Oranguru, he's got the Lugia, and he's seeming, you know, pretty happy, pretty confident. We see the powerful colorless energy coming onto the Lugia, and that's a fairly muted turn 1 from Tord. But again, you'd need your VMAX, your V-Star, and 2 Archeops in the discard by turn 2. Doesn't matter whether it happens turn 1 or 2.
It's not too bad. Like you said, yeah, got 1 in the bin. You have to imagine just trying your Luminio for a research maybe and try and get raw. Nico here has a pretty good hand, actually. Has a Quick Ball, has the Course Experiment, has a Pokegear. I wonder what those 5 cards are. Priorities are going to be getting another Arceus, so just get rid of Marnie and Lost City. Lost City has 0 use in this matchup, so Nico having no problems sending that to the Lost Zone.
No, Tord is playing a fairly straightforward deck, like we've said, at least as far as Lugia goes. There's no recovery card, so a KO is just... Getting it in the discard is just as good as getting it in the lost zone. It's not going to be coming back from that. So get rid of that. You do have an Ultra Ball in hand. We do have... Is that a Quick Ball or another Ultra Ball? It is a Quick Ball, so there's plenty of ways for Nico to get some cards out here. Might be worth saving the Ultra Ball for next turn to go and get the V-Star. Because again, more than like Tord, Nico's first turn can often be a little bit muted. The best case scenario is you get a Duraludon V on the bench and you get a double turbo attached to your active Arceus V. Get yourself a bit of Trinity charge to start accelerating energy. That is the only real play for Nico on turn 1.
No, you're 100% correct. But when you go in second, you might want to try... It's really interesting, right? Because if you go in second, chances are your active Arceus will get KO'd, which means you won't have access to Starbirth for the whole game. So I know sometimes when I've played Arceus right on, if you go in second versus Lugia, you might try and put down a second Arceus just to make sure you have access to Starbirth. But then if you do that, that's extra prizes for your opponent to take. So it's an interesting scenario here. Maybe Nico staying towards turn wasn't too terribly explosive. Odds on Tord being able to get another Archeops in the bin and weave in a Serena and or Boss to take a KO is quite low, at least on Duraludon. So I'm intrigued. Does Nico have energy, actually?
I don't think he's got any. That's what I said about the muted turn. I didn't see a double turbo energy, which, although there is at least a light... There's light... No, he doesn't play lightning energy. I saw something. It was a metal energy that I saw. Oh, it was a hyper potion. That's what I was looking at. It can be hard when they're flicking the cards around. So we see the attach. We don't see the Trinity charge here. And you're right, it is awkward. We do see the pass over the Tord. So there is a potential here. If Tord can get an explosive turn, there's no Temple of Sinnoh in play. Tord could get a big KO on Arceus this turn. Or maybe even, it's a lot to ask, but there is an outside chance of maybe even getting rid of the only Duraludon at the same time.
I think this I think this Oranguru were able to decide the fate for that. What was that? Is a Speed Lightning.
Speed Lightning.
So the interesting thing, though, here is if Tord does get the KO here on this Arceus, which I think is fairly straightforward that he will, because Nico has found his big Parasol, provided, and Tord doesn't play a Lost Vacuum, I should say as well, as long as Nico can evolve that Duraludon into a VMAX, he can just sit there and attach 3 energies a turn, knowing that Tord actually can't do anything about it. He won't be able to do any damage, won't be able to use amazing destruction. He can just sit there and say, let me just draw into my 3 energies at some point, doesn't really matter when, because you can't do anything anyway, and just get to swinging.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do see Tord here. He gets Luminion down. He's going to search himself a supporter. It is a boss's orders onto the Duraludon. So I said it was an outside chance of getting the Duraludon. It doesn't look that outside anymore. And it looks like we are going to see... we're not there yet. We will need... We've only got 3 energy on there. He hasn't attached for turn, I believe. I think we've seen the Archeops come out. We've seen the Archeops ability. There was definitely one powerful colourless energy played from hand last turn. So I think Tord's got a turn attachment left here. It is that Speed Lightning energy. We are going to see the KO on Duraludon here. And if Tord can just go after the Duraludon, he doesn't need to worry about the VMAX ability. He's just going to win the game.
It does open up the Mustard play here, though, for Nico. He can Starbirth for Mustard, and if he can try and navigate into a double turbo energy there, the Arceus will be able to Trinity Nova onto it there, and then Nico can be straight back in the race, but would need to find Big Parasol to completely make himself. And what's a hand saying?
And we just saw a big Parasol go away.
Yeah,
he plays
so
2,
to find another one.
And one of them just hit the discard. So that was actually another sneaky advantage to Tord's last play. So this is kind of big. Now, we're seeing a very low hand size coming down here with the Ultra Ball coming down. So I think... if Nico wants to use Starbirth to get the Mustard, I think he's going to be able to do it, getting a Mustard and maybe something like an Ultra Ball or a Quick Ball just to get rid of the last couple of cards in hand. If you want to stretch for that, I think Nico's got the hand to do it.
Yeah, I think in combination with Starbirth, he can definitely pull off the Mustard. And I think it might be the only play. I mean, the Mustard isn't prized. 2 VMAXs are, though. Hopefully hasn't got it in. Oh, was that a Duraludon V?
I didn't see. I think it is a Duraludon V. No, it's an Arceus V he's gone and got here. So this is an interesting one. If he isn't going for the Duraludon V, you've got to imagine that's because he's thinking, I'm going to Mustard.
Yeah.
And Starbirth makes everything easier. I mean, being able to go and search any 2 cards from your deck, that is a ridiculous ability. Not all V-Star powers are created equally, Shay.
No.
And this might be the very best of them.
Oh, opting to play the pokey gear here. That's interesting. I mean, if this fails, it could make it harder to Mustard, actually. And it looks like, was that a fail? I think it might have been.
I think there was a Raihan in there, but he chose not to grab it, and he is instead going for the Starburst, and this is where he's going to really telegraph where he's going. That is an Ultra Ball coming to the front of the deck there, and so is he going to be going for the Mustard? But I didn't see it. I'm sure I saw an Ultra Ball there. So there is the Ultra Ball getting rid of the 2 cards, and there's the Mustard. So as we said, using that Starburst, and it's actually really simple. If you've got 1 card left in hand, you go Quick Ball. If there's 2 cards left in hand, you go Ultra Ball. And now we see it, and you see Tord kind of smiling and laughing there going, well, that's the one thing I didn't want you to do.
Yeah, I didn't want you to put a Gerald on for your max down. How dare you get around Evolution rules? I tell you what, if Nico can draw into a DTE here as well, what a swing turn that'll be, because Mustard does let you draw 5 cards from the top of your deck as well. Let's see what Nico can draw. If you see a Trinity charge here, that is such a strong statement. If you saw Trinity Nova, I should say, plus Big Parasol, that is game defining.
Oh yeah, that would be such a great turn for Nico there. Doesn't get it. He's got a single energy. Does have a Temple of Sinnoh, which would be kind of interesting. Goes for an Evolution Incense at this stage, presumably just really thinning his deck. And we see a lot of these Arceus Duraludon players, this is the setup. Yeah. They don't want to give you any options for KOing bench Pokemon. Tord's already got a cheeky 2 prizes. So, yeah, Nico here, really, that was a double turbo. And the awkward thing is, yes, he could have got it off the Starburst, but then he wouldn't have been able to empty his hand to play the Mustard. It had to be Mustard and then an Ultra Ball to empty his hand.
No, you are correct. The Temple of Sinnoh could be quite interesting, because if Tord can't remove it, that would mean Nico's Arceus won't get KO'd, because obviously the Temple of Sinnoh will turn off the powerful energies as well. So, and one interesting thing here for Nico is that if he can weave in a boss's orders on Tord's lone Archeops, that is pretty much game-defining as well at some point. Now, I'll be interested to see where this metal goes. Does go to the active. I imagine we will see Temple come down, and it goes back over to Tord. Wow, that was a strong turn there. That
was a strong turn. It wasn't perfect. The DT would have made it perfect. Tord here, Tord's looking for Pumpkaboo. That's what you're looking for here. You need to get that Pumpkaboo. You need to bounce the stadium. And there's already, I believe, 3 powerful colorless energy on Lugia, which means it's hitting 280. And we don't have energy on Duraludon, which means Nico would be forced, and you can't play any more Arceus now, because that gives Tord too easy a prize map. So you would be forced into your manual attachments, and this is how Tord wins. But looking at the way he's playing his cards here, it's very slow. You got to think if he had access to the Pumpkaboo, we probably would have seen it already. I mean, or he's just slow rolling us.
Yeah, I mean, he does have a ton of options in the hand, but maybe just Tord opts in to work out. Tord just trying to work out the exact scenarios. Does have access to Amani, but Nico's hand is very small. Does have access to Luminium, but that's 2 prizes. This might turn into a race here between 2 players. Tord wants to try and get the wants to find Yveltal powered up as soon as possible, and Nico just wants to try and find energies plus Big Parasol, and the first player to get there, you know, could win the game. We do see Luminia's sign, letting you grab a support from the deck, and it looks like we're just going to see that Professor's Research.
Yeah, you want to dig as far as you can here. You want to go for as many cards as you can. You need the Pumpkaboo. He is actually eyeing up a boss's orders here, but I don't... I mean, there is certainly an argument for this to, you know, if you can't get the KO on the Arceus, then potentially, you know, trying to stall out a little bit, stop that Trinity Nova coming down with the Arceus to get that extra energy onto the Duraludon here. So it looks like... Did we see what he got from the Luminian?
No, it didn't. Did it so quick, unfortunately. Here we do see the Primal Turbo, so hopefully looks like might be eyeing up a Aqua return here. Well, we won't be able to Aqua return if Temple of Sinnoh hangs around, actually. That's something to keep note of. But I think it was a research. I don't think it was a boss's orders. Boss orders wouldn't really accomplish much. So, I mean, we'll see soon enough anyway. But just interested to see how Tord navigates this this turn here. Because if anyone can navigate this match correctly, you have to imagine Tord is half on that list, right?
Oh, yeah. And I I think, you know, the Pumpkaboo is the absolute priority this turn. Bump that stadium. And it is interesting to note, Nico only plays one copy of that Temple of Sinnoh. So if it does leave the field, it's not coming back here. Now, we do see, there is the Professor's research. It had to be. You want to be digging for as many cards as possible here. We do see a Boss's Orders hit the discard. There's actually 2 in the discard now, but that's not the end of the world. As long as you can bump this stadium, get a KO on the Arceus, get down to 2 prizes remaining. And the thing is, if you're down to 2 prizes remaining, there is the quick ball for the Pumpkaboo. It's actually quite simple. If Nico doesn't get the big Parasol, use Evil Talon win.
Yep, that is 100% correct. Nico just has to try and prioritize that big Parasol. Maybe try and use Raihan to try and get to it. That would work. But yeah, that finding that pumpkin pit there was huge. That turns back on the powerful energies, like I said, Tempest Dive 220 base, plus 60 for all these powerful energies, hits 280. That will KO the Arceus, and really putting Nico in a dangerous position with 1 Pokemon in play with no energy in play as well.
Yeah, this has turned out very, very well for Tord here. Took out the Duraludon, and Nico was like, it's all right, I can use Mustard to get it back. And then he's like, well, what if I took out your Arceus before? And this is why missing the double turbo last turn for Nico was such a big deal. There is a huge difference in having 0 energy and free energy on this when it comes into the active, and finds that double turbo, but it's too late, so it just goes straight into the lost zone.
I mean, it is worth noting that Nico does have a couple extra turns here because Tord's bench is full. That's why I think we saw Tord set up for the Aqua return, so we can get the Yveltal in play eventually. And then Nico also has a potential way to win if he can try and boss carry the Archeops before Yveltal is set up. That's also an option. But Nico sort of looks like it's stuck in top deck mode a little bit, as we do see Tord start off the turn with a Primal Turbo and get some energies from the deck.
Yeah, great point there about the Luminion. You need to get a bench space free for that Yveltal, and you're not playing Scoop Up Net or anything like that in this deck, so it does have to be getting a Pokemon off the board. So we Aqua return with Luminion. It's not going to do any damage because it's got special energy and Duraludon prevents that damage, but it is at least going to fill a bench, empty a bench space, literally the opposite, and that is going to potentially mean that next turn Tord can Yveltal and go and get the win, which has got to be the plan at this stage, because Lugia's not doing much against Duraludon.
No, all Lugia can do against Duraludon is a whole lot of nothing, really. and discard stadiums, actually. That's about it. We do see the pay retreats. Those powerful engines aren't going to be particularly useful now. That is just a Duraludon inactive. And here we see an Aqua return there. I love seeing a little bit of sequence in there from Tord, opting to over-attach with the Primal Turbo, just so that Oranguru had maximum outs to find other stuff that aren't energy. And then we see the Aqua return, freeing up that bench spot, and then shuffling back into the deck. Nico hasn't got a lot of turns to navigate here victory. What was that Evolution Incense? Hasn't got a supporter.
Oh, that is bad. Now, he does have an Ultra Ball here. Problem is, anything you bench is probably going to be a more attractive target for Tord than the Duraludon. So if he benches this Arceus, Tord plays 3 Boss's Orders for a reason. Now, there are 2 in the discard, but I think he's still got access to 1. There's no power pad or anything like that, so it is just the last one. But we did just see Luminion go back into the deck, which is an easy way to go and find that Boss's Orders. So I like Tord's position here. On paper, you look at Duraludon and go, oh, well, against a deck that only plays special energy, this seems amazing. And it does. But you'll see Tord here has been playing this game not in the way he usually would, because you have to get around it.
Yeah, only Tord can play Lugia into Duraludon with no Lugia outs. Realistically, no Texar, not Big Parasol, sorry, Canceling Clone and Lost Vacuum, and still be in a commanding position. And it goes back over to Tord. Nico just attaching energy, so he's only a fighting energy away from being able to attack, but Tord does play the cat. Oh, so here comes the Yveltal, I imagine, and then we can start to see some Primal Turbos onto it.
There it is.
Meaning the clock now has started for Nico. Hasn't got a lot of time. Needs to deal with this. Needs to find Big Parasol or Energy plus Boss to just KO it. Otherwise, Tord will win this game. I've played a lot of Duraludon in my time, Ross, and I know that clock has started now.
It's next turn. You're not, unfortunately, going to get it going this turn, I don't believe, because it's a 5 energy attack, and you can use double turbo energy if you really wish, but that's still 4 energy, and with only 1 Archeops on the field, you're limited to 3 energy attachments for your turn. 2 from the Arceus, 1 from your hand. However, next turn, as long as Tord can get a turn attachment this turn or next turn, we've already seen, oh, not this turn because he's already seen it to the active, if Tord gets a turn attachment next turn, he will win the game unless Nico gets Big Parasol or Energy Boss to get the KO.
Yeah, that's the only route now for Nico's victory. And that is the sort of game plan against Lugia. If you're Duraludon, is to try and KO the Archeops and then try and boss KO the Yveltal if necessary. But I don't think Nico's hand supports it. He needs to top that something really good. Corvus could try and find a Big Parasol. I don't think he's even got fight energy in hand, so I think boss won't be coming out next turn. So let's see what Tord does here. Does have a research there. Does a little Primate Wisdom. And yeah, here we go. Big turn here for Nico to stay in the tournament, or at least in this game, I should say.
Oh, it's a single metal energy.
Concession.
Yeah, Nico scoops up his card, concedes a game to Tord. Tord goes up 1-0 because Nico just had absolutely nothing. He had to get the KO or the Parasol that turn. Didn't get it. He's not going to let Tord have, you know, an extra turn to actually do the KO with Yveltal. It is just, right, okay, fine, let's go to game 2. And this is great for Tord because this is a matchup that can get very hairy if Nico's board gets established. So having won game 1, it means there's 2 games, one of which you will go first, and you only need to win one of them to get through into the final.
And that just shows the inherent strengths of Lugia, right? This is a Lugia deck that isn't playing, like I said, you know, the normal outs to Duraludon that some players would play, you know, Irida, Lost Vacuum, and/or cancelling Clone. But Tord's still managing to get the W there in game 1. I really like the play of, you know, going for the Summoning Star just for 1 target, because you can still put immediate pressure on. Because if that Arceus was able to survive the turn, the basic, I should say, then that game could have got out of hand for Tord, but he didn't. He closed the door as he goes 1-0 up. And as we can see in the other top 4 games, well, Vinny currently 1-0 up against Stefan Ivanov.
Yeah, so that's something to keep an eye on as well. I'm loving these bracket updates. Everyone here keeping us up to date of exactly what's happening in all the other games. Makes life very easy for us. So we do have, you know, Tord against Vinny at the moment, but everything could change. We are playing best of 3 for a reason. We want to make sure we've got the very best players in the final, not just someone who, you know, had a good game. So far, Tord on the front. But we saw there was several turns where that could have gone wrong. You know, that turn where Nico missed a double turbo energy, that could have changed everything.
Yeah, no, for sure, because then that Duraludon would have been swinging, putting on a ton of pressure. And that's one thing Lugia can't really do, is absorb many G-Max pulverizations. Lugia can take one for sure, but Lumineon can't. You know, Archeops definitely can't. None of them can take the G-Max pulverization. So you have to imagine that. And that's just the strength of going first, right? If you go first as Arc Duraludon here, which you might see, it's just so much better because then you can get the Trinity Nova off, and you most likely can get a Duraludon roll in. But let's see how this game 2 pans out. Nico has to win this game here to keep his Utrecht special title chances alive. And
it is worth noting, Tord only got the single Archeops last game. We don't usually see a win when you get a single Archeops. Tord managed it because it was a slightly slower paced game. But if Tord can get the double Archeops this game, that could give him, you know, even a better time than last game. Be interesting to see.
Yeah, if you can go double Archeops, that means you can spring the Yveltal in a single turn, which is terrifying to think about, but it is a possibility. We see the turn 1 Temple of Sinnoh, very interesting, and a pass over to as he leads that copy of Manaphy, I believe that is, not terribly helpful in this matchup, so it might just be offered as a bit of a sacrifice, as it were.
If you can't guess that up, that Temple of Sinnoh early is really interesting, of course. As we've said, there is only 1 copy in Nico's deck, and it is so good against Lugia. Now, the good news is Tord only gets rid of it by getting an attack with Lugia or by playing the Pumpkaboo.
It's got Pumpkaboo in hand.
Oh, that's got Pumpkaboo in hand. That's awesome. I'm having a quick look at the prizes here. 1 Arceus V-Star, 1 Duraludon V-Star, 1 double turbo energy, but also a big Parasol, which is going to be harder to find. And we saw in the last game, you don't find big Parasol, and Yveltal, well, you're not going to like him.
No, and if you can't find the copy of Big Parasol, your sort of priorities have to change as the Duraludon player. You have to then just try and aggressively aggressively get rid of the Archeops, because then that's your next best defense, right? You can boss KO 1, and then Tord would then normally have to then bench your Yveltal, attach 2 to that. Then you have to boss that. You have to go boss.
Yep.
Really, that is the defense if you don't find Parasol. But you'd rather, just to be honest with you, just put the Parasol on, then you can just be like, right, I can relax a little bit now.
It's a little bit easier. It's worth actually pointing out, Nico plays a full 4 copies of Boss's orders, so there are going to be some gusting if he really needs it. He's probably going to have it unless we end up in a situation like last game where he just is completely in top deck mode. Now, Tord's played a quick ball here. He's actually eyeing up a Luminian V so we can get a Professor's Research. He just wants a new hand. He's not having any of this.
No. Really interesting that. I did quite like the Temple of Sinnoh that could turn off any capture engines potentially, which, you know, Lugia decks love to just try and pluck out their Lugia Vs, but Tord, you know, does have the Pumpkin Pit in hand. So I like this now, just getting some Archeops in the hand just to immediately get discarded with the Professor's Research, I would imagine. And a ton of energy in this hand as well, though. DTE in there. I think there's a capture in there as well. Does obviously play the capture now, so I imagine find a Lugia V, and then that would be a very good first turn there for Tord.
Yeah, it is getting kind of awkward, though. He's got the Manaphy out. He doesn't really want out. He's got the Pumpkaboo. He doesn't really want out. The Luminian, he doesn't really want out. And that means that if he gets 2 Archeops out of his discard pile with Lugia's ability, he is stuck on 1 Lugia until he frees up a bench space.
And the only way he can really fill up this bench space, there is no scoop up next, would be the Aqua return again. If you saw in game 1, that would just remove the Luminion. But if that hits into a Geraldon, it's going to do no damage. And the math doesn't strike me as particularly relevant to be using that to hit into an Arceus V.
No, not really. Like we saw with the last game, that Aqua return, it was very simply one thing, right? The Aqua return was, I really need a bench space for a Voltorb and I don't have one. That was why he went for it. And now we do see the Professor's Research being played. New hand of 7 cards. Now, I know he's got 1 Archeops in the discard pile already. Did he get a second, did you see, Shay?
Yeah, so the first one got quick balled away, and then the Evolution Incense and Research for the last one.
Yes, so there was 2 second one there. Fantastic. So that means that this is about as good as Tord could want turn 1. Like, genuinely, if you've got a Lugia and 2 Archeops in the discard, that's basically it. That will get you through a lot of games, just getting that turn 1. Now turn 2, all he needs is a V-Star and he's off and rolling.
Well, they're worth noting. Nico didn't get down a Geraldon, I just realised, on his first turn. So if they want to see a VMAX this turn, it might have to be a Mustard player. And I wonder if that's what Nico is going to try and set up. I think it's possible. Obviously, with Starbirth, it's Ultra Ball will probably find the Arceus V-Star, and then Starbirth letting you grab 2 cards from the deck is, like I said, absolutely insane when you think about it, really. Which always keeps you in the game.
He could do it, incidentally. I think he's got at least 1 card he can play from his hand. So doing what he did last game, again in the Ultra Ball, and yeah, so here is the energy. So he's already got it in hand. Oh my goodness, I did not see that. So that's amazing there. Using Mustard and then getting the 5 cards is absolutely brilliant.
And what's... Oh, no, I think he wanted to...
just conceded?
I think he wanted to Starbirth before the Mustard, I think. Or did... Or is Tord just conceded? I think Tord just conceded, actually.
I think Tord just conceded that game, yeah.
Because he had the big Parasol, so yeah.
It was literally a case of, I've got the Arceus a big Parasol, and like we've been saying all along, you can't beat a Duraludon with a big Parasol. There is no answer to Duraludon with big Parasol. So it looked like a weird concession, and it kind of caught us by surprise. Because the sequencing was a little bit like, well, I'm using this, and I'm Starbirthing, and I'm getting the Parasol. And he actually never even drew off the Urshifu. Sorry, off the Urshifu. The Mustard. Mustard has an Urshifu, but he never even drew off the Mustard because the Mustard was only relevant for getting the Duraludon out. You then Starbirth for the Parasol, and Tord goes, I literally cannot deal with this Pokemon. Who wants a game 3?
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit of interesting noise there for Nico. Might now realise, wait a minute, Tord doesn't actually have an out to Duraludon Parasol, so maybe that might change the way Nico played to try and prioritise that, knowing that Tord might just scoop up again, maybe in a game 3. But I appreciate that from Tord, though, a veteran's concession, basically saying, right, well, there's nothing I can do here, so let's try and have as much time, I should say, for a game 3. And after that real chess match there in game 1, I thought really navigating that game well, to just being like, well, can't do anything about that, let's keep it moving to game 3.
But I think that's the difference in a real veteran player like Tord. You'll see a lot of players go, well, I played out for a couple turns, maybe I'll find something, maybe I'll think of an idea. Tord is like, I know I can't beat that. Let's just go straight to game 3. Got a little bit bamboozled when it wasn't drawing cards, then he searched for the parasol of it. What's going on? But no, it turned out, and I think both players know this, right? It is now a thing, and Tord knows this matchup so well. Not every player tests against everything. We know Tord tests against everything. Tord knows this matchup so well, and it really is a case of, if you get the Duraludon with a parasol and you don't have enough other prizes for me to take, I can't win this game. There was still an Arceus to take 2 prizes, but Tord was never going to be able to get rid of that Duraludon. There weren't enough other prizes. It was never going to work.
I wonder if you're Nico now, right? You're going second, but do you just play the game in such a way where you can prioritize Mustard plus plus big parasol, right? I mean, if you put down 2 Arceus going first, you're always going to have access to Starbirth. Maybe you could try and navigate that play somehow, but let's see what the prizes are.
Nothing terrible.
Too bad for each player, actually. You know, only having 1 copy of Duraludon being back to Nefnick had 2 copies in game 1. But here we go, the start of game 3. The winner of this game will advance to the finals of the Utrecht special event here, Tord Reklev versus Nico. I'm going to put you on the spot now, Ross. Who you got?
I mean, well, if Nico gets Duraludon with Big Parasol, I've got Nico. Otherwise, I think I've probably got Tord. And I think Nico's been going for that both games.
Yeah.
I just think game 1, it didn't quite work. He wasn't able to actually get the pieces together in the right order, playing that Big Parasol early and not being able to find the other one, and then being in top deck mode. But Tord here, it's awkward because Tord knows what he needs to do. He knows he needs to get the Archeops like normal. He needs to try and get a couple of cheeky KOs, and then he needs to set up the Yveltal. But that's all irrelevant if Nico gets the big Parasol.
Yeah, and that's a sort of interesting position Tord has put himself in there. A lot of players do respect Duraludon enough to, you know, to have the tech cards, you know, lost vacuum. Tord said, no, don't worry about it. And I'll just try and navigate my way to win against Duraludon. Anyway, might be coming back to haunt him here in top 4, but let's see how this game gets navigated. We do see an Oranguru, we do see an Evolution Incense. There's probably going to be, well, a deck search for Tord first of all, to try and work out what's been prized. But then, yeah, imagine he'll probably find himself an Archeops, and then that will get quickly discarded via Quick Ball for Pokemon of Tord's choice.
Yeah, and that's what we see. This Evolution Incense in this deck is pretty much always just played to... occasionally you might get a cheeky V-Star off it. Most of the time, grab Archeops, discard Archeops, go on with your day. I mean, we saw somebody on the stream yesterday playing Professor Burnett just to search out and discard the Archeops straight away with your supporter, which it's actually a card clearly designed for V-Unions, but actually works kind of nicely in this deck as well.
Yeah, it basically means all your Quick Balls become 2 Archeops in the discard pile, because you just Quick Ball a minion for Professor Burnett. And in my future format testing, actually, was Professor Burnett, it seems to be pretty much a staple in the Lugia deck. So there's a little bit of hints there for your Twitch chat about the future format stuff there. As we do see the Quick Ball hit the Quick Ball, get the Archeops, I should say, into the discard pile, and there it is for Luminion V.
Yeah, Archeops and Arceus, it's a little bit confusing at times. We'll get there, though, Shay. I believe in us.
I'm trying my best.
Interesting to note, actually, just while we got a second while Tord's doing his deck search, Tord hasn't lost a game yet. He's 10-05.
Oh.
Tord has not lost a match at all this weekend. He's won exactly 2/3 of his games, tied 1/3 of his games. So you kind of got to think, is this really going to be his first loss? The answer is, well, we watched game 1. It absolutely... Oh, sorry, game 2, it absolutely could be.
Yeah, and imagine that, being able to win a special event without dropping a game. Something that Alex Dow actually managed to do all the way back with Gyarados back in the day. So shout outs to him. He'll be on next. And back over to Tord, though. Let's see what we... She's just looking at us now. What are you saying?
So we do get the energy attachment there onto the active Lugia. It is that double turbo. So, and that's kind of setting up for a future. Potentially it could be a retreat. It could be an attack. It's just giving up a lot of options there. And again, that's not a terrible turn 1. That is only 1 Archeops in the discard. Yep. We really do need to get a second. But you've got Lugia, you've got energy, you've got 1 Archeops in the discard. If you can get the second in the discard next turn, this is going to be a good start.
Oh, big Parasol in the chorus, but it's with a single strike Mustard. That's actually quite well, that's not ideal. You don't want to see both of these cards now because they're very counterproductive. Mustard wants to put a VMAX into play straight away, which means you won't be able to attach the Parasol from hand because you need to have no cards in your hand to play Mustard. So I guess this Corvus experiment has sort of decided the fate for Nico here, saying that you're not going to be able to Mustard this game. Or if you do want to, you're going to have to try and find your one-off big Parasol afterwards.
Yeah, and that is a good point. Well made and super duper awkward. You need to get your Mustard and you need to then get your Parasol. Oh, he does put the Mustard in the lost zone. And this gives Tord a huge piece of information. What this says to Tord is, please don't KO my bench Duraludon V.
Yeah.
That would be bad. Now, we do see the Duraludon V with the Parasol and the Temple of Sinnoh and an attachment onto the Arceus here. So actually, the turn ended really nicely for Nico, but you've got to think, if you're Tord here, I have to get that Duraludon, just like we saw at the beginning of game 1.
No, you're 100% correct. And it's going to be a really important turn here for Tord. Nico trying to force Tord into try and jump over as many hurdles as possible. Did put the Oranguru in the active via escape rope. Not a card you see in Duraludon too much, actually. Tord's trying to work out what's the best way I can navigate around here. You know, does have a Luminion in hand to kind of use Luminion sign to maybe grab a research bin. Needs to actually get rid of the Temple of Sinnoh. Needs to get this Oranguru out the active as well. And sort of needs to play the minigame of getting one more Archeops in the discard pile as well. But it can do it, but will put Nico under immense pressure.
Yeah, and if he pulls it off, it is going to be huge. And it's a question we see in Lugia quite a lot. Can I really go single Archeops?
Yeah.
Usually, the games I mean, Tord actually, in game 1, it was the first time I've been on stream as a caster and seen a player go single Archeops because they couldn't get the second, and it actually worked and won a game. Most of the time, you don't win, but Tord knows how bad this matchup can get. We saw that in game 2 with that, you know, super quick concession. So if you think you can piece together enough things to get the KO on Duraludon, that's when it is worth going single Archeops. He would need another energy, and he would need a gusting, and he would need a pivot option. But if he's got all those things, it might still be worth doing.
Well, one piece of the puzzle here is that there is the quick board hand, so that can find Punkaboo to remove the Temple of Sinnoh, but I'm not 100% sure if you can weave in Boss's orders, get the Oranguru out the active, not the way it stands now currently, to take a KO on the Duraludon V because of that. I think the ability actually pushes it out of range, that hard coat ability. And yeah, we're going to see a Marnie. I think, hasn't Nico only got a 1-card hand, no? Was it a 2-card? Either way, I think that might be helping Nico out a little bit.
Well, he has gone for the Marnie here, kind of telegraphing what he's going to do. He obviously thinks that Nico has got enough stuff in his hand. And sometimes, remember, you know, in a deck like this, you might see your opponent keeping a very low hand because one of those cards is an Arceus V-Star, which turns into a Starbuff, which turns into any 2 cards you want. So essentially, this is kind of like Tord betting that, okay, Nico might have a low hand size, but I think it's because you've got the cards you need.
Sort of playing the mind games there, saying, oh no, I've got a 2-card hand, and one of them's like, you know, Arceus V-Star, which then, you know, turns into Starbuff, and then turns into any 2 cards I want. And this is a really... is he playing the Marnie there?
Marnie's
playing the
Marnie. So Nico did a few cards in hand. There wasn't that small a hand. But either way, it is going back to the bottom of the deck. Now we're seeing 4 cards from Nico. And Tord is hoping here. I couldn't get the Duraludon, but you know what? Maybe I can still get a bunch of early pressure. If I can get... Oh, there's an Evolution Incense. If he's got some kind of Pokemon search, he is going to be able to get the Archeops into the discard pile with a switch. This would do it. He no longer needs a turn attachment because he's going to be getting the double Archeops. And actually, if he's got... Oh, it depends how much energy he's... See, he could even go double turbo onto the Oranguru, I believe, to manually retreat here while putting the other 3 energy onto Lugia. That would actually do it, I think. Oh, he's already got the Aurora energy onto the Oranguru in the active, but that was, I think, so that he could discard the Archeops.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened then. Trying to work out so you can go, because there's a double turbo energy now, so that would mean that Tempest Dive is at 200, so you would need to go double powerful, and then the next primal turbo to the active, so you can pay retreat, and that will KO the Arceus, and that really asks a lot of questions of Nico. Now, you're basically saying, right, although actually at this moment in time, as long as Nico has an evolution out of that Marnie, he'll win.
Does he have a...
He's got the Duraludon and a big Parasol attached.
Oh, he's got the big Parasol attached. So, yeah, if he's got the VMAX, this could still be a very quick game. But it's going to be an interesting one because
laughing at Todd, looking so nonchalant. Clearly the two very good friends there, and it's always fun to get to play with your friends, but I wouldn't imagine you'd be so nonchalant in a top 4 game.
I would not be so nonchalant in a top 4 game. But I think there is also an element of Todd. You know, Todd has won a lot. Todd has been in top 4 a lot. He's been on stream a lot. Todd is also clever enough to know that sometimes you're not going to win.
Yeah.
And I think Todd's kind of accepted the fact, if Nico's deck does what Nico's deck's supposed to do, I'm only getting a top 4 finish here. We know he's number 1 on the leaderboard by, well, actually, number 2 is quite close. Everyone else is miles behind. So we see the KO, and this is it. Do we get the VMAX from Nico? And if we do, will we see the concession?
Ultra
It's
Ball!
an Ultra Ball!
And there's the concession!
Is he conceding?
Wait, is that...
Now we see the
concession.
We see an Ultra Ball for Infernal VMAX, and Tor's like, I've seen enough, I will concede, and Nico Alabas is going to be our first finalist in the Utrecht special event. And we asked the question at the beginning of the game, does Tor have an answer to Duraludon with that big parasol? The answer was no. Tor doesn't have an answer to Arceus, to Duraludon with the big parasol. He just hoped he could navigate it anyway. Game 1, oh yeah. Game 2 and 3, oh no.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's a sort of gambit if you're told there that if when you built your deck and you took it to this event saying, I'm not going to have any outs to Duraludon Big Parasol, I'm not going to play the Lost Vacuum, I'm not going to play the Cancelling Cologne. You're basically saying, right, I'm just going to hope that this situation never happens, which is Duraludon plus Big Parasol, and if it does, I'm just going to have to scoop him up. I'm intrigued to see if Tord actually managed to navigate through any Arceus Duraludons here on his way here, and then if he did, how those matches end up playing. But fair play to Nico there, doing everything he could to get himself in the finals.
And then, of course, there is an interesting question about the difference between a special event and a regional. Because, of course, at a regional, where there's prize money on the line, maybe you're not willing to take those risks in your deck building, but because it's a special event, you go, you know what? I'm only playing for championship points. I am definitely locked in for top 32 this top 22 this season. I think we can say that about Tord.
Yep.
So maybe this is a tournament where you can try a slightly less teched out Lugia list to see how it goes. But let's stop talking about Tord. Let's start talking about Nico here, because we've got a player who's going to book his way into the final, and Nico's been around a long time.
Yep.
We've seen an international championship victory from him, and frankly, he is one of the best players in the game right now. Not just in Europe, I'm talking about the world.
No, 100%. One of the game's premier players. Actually, man, speak to him at Stuttgart Regionals for our on-demand content in between rounds. And the way he thinks about the game is second to none. Very clever, thinks meticulous with all his card choices and things like this. I think we're going to have our top bracket here to look at as well, see if there's been any more development. So there we do see Nico Alaba securing his place in the final. And looks like Stefan Ivanov manages to even up that top 4 match, going all the way to a game 3 as well.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one. It's going to be, and that is, of course, a Gudra mirror match. So Nico knows he's playing against Gudra. The only question is, who's going to be the pilot of that Gudra deck? Of course, we were always going to be the first game to finish unless something weird happened, because the games where Tord conceded, they were not long games. Tord is not in, you know, Tord knows he's not going to win against a Duraludon with a big parasol. So Tord just goes, look, show it to me. If I see it, I will concede. And although game 1 was kind of a fairly long back and forth game, 2 and 3, oh no, they were quick.
And I think you have to sort of appreciate that's probably how the matchup, I feel as if, should probably go. If you're not playing any outs to Duraludon, I think you'd be a bit cheeky to expect to win a best 2 out of 3. And like we were saying earlier, Nico, one of the best players in the world, took this deck to the event here, saying I think it's really well placed, Duraludon, especially with the combination of Lost Cities that we've seen as well. And it's really been able to sort of run the gambit on the meta, being really strong against, you know, Lost Box with the Lost Cities and Lugia as well. And I do believe Nico is ready there for a winner's interview. So let's hear about him and how he feels about securing his place in the finals.
Thank you so much, Shay. Yeah, we're here with our finalist, Nico, managing to overcome your friend and testing partner, Tord Reklev, in quite an interesting game. Tell us how that went down.
Yeah, so the thing is, like you said, right, like Todd and I are good friends, so we all stayed together for this weekend. And on Friday, when we were like building our decks, Todd was, I kind of want to play 17 energies this weekend. He was on 18 initially, but we got him down to 17. And he was like, what could we cut? It could either be the 4th research or the vacuum. Hey, let's just cut the vacuum. And I was like, literally since Friday, I've been joking that I was coming for him, and then the entire day today he was trying to dodge me, but then eventually he didn't get to dodge me anymore. So yeah, I mean, we said from the beginning, or like he said from the beginning, that like once I put down a Duraludon with Parasol, he's just going to concede because there's nothing he can do as long as I have the basic energies in my deck to attack. And yeah, that's basically what game 2 and 3 came down to. Game 1 was a bit unfortunate. I could have maybe played it a little bit different. Might have to go and look back at that. But yeah, he got the turn 2 boss KO onto my only Duraludon. Was also my only Parasol because the second one was prized. So yeah, that was a bit unfortunate. But then thankfully, I was even talking to him on stream. I don't know if you were like hearing it while we were playing the game. That if this Mani, like if at the last tournament where Mani is legal, I lose to a Mani, then I'm just
good
done.
riddance to Mani. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. But yeah, it was that checkmate scenario, which is fantastic for you. Obviously, it meant that you had a very clear goal in mind for that game, and also your top 8 game. It was another interesting situation for you. Not something that comes up in usual top 8s, right?
Yeah. So my opponent was actually a long-time player, Lawrence. He has been playing like 4 or 5 years ago. He was always like in contention also for top 22 and everything, so a well-known player among players that have been around for a while. But he actually lives in Utrecht, so he just came here because the turn was close, and obviously it's a special event, so free entry and everything. So he was just like playing, decided to play Gudra, and then in top 8, because the pricing doesn't change at all, like everyone just gets 3 boxes. Obviously there's like medals and like a champion playmat for first, but he was like, yeah, I'm down to concede because I know like you're going for top 22 and I've been in that position, and people trying to like gatekeep is what he was like annoyed at back in the day. So he he just gave me the win there because he didn't care about the championship points too much. Yeah,
really unique situation, which has worked out very nicely for you. And then you get to come into a really untech'd Lugia, which is another fantastic situation. And now you're up against Gudra in the finals. We don't know who just yet, but we know it's Gudra. How do you feel about that matchup?
It's actually interesting because like we've been talking in our group and everything, and we're like very split on opinions because it essentially just comes down to it's very similar to a Duraludon mirror. It just comes down to who can attack the other's threat first. So in my case, my threat is Duraludon, obviously. In his case, it's the Gudra. And since Gudra can heal once, it's essentially like 1 free hit. And that free hit still doesn't matter though if you can get the first hit because of like hyper potion in the Duraludon deck. So yeah, it just comes down, unless obviously there's stuff like Mani bricking or general bricking. But if both players get to play the game, it just comes down to who gets to attack the other person's threat first. Like if I can boss his Gudra first, or if he can like hit into my Duraludon first, basically.
Well, it sounds like at the very least you have a game plan and you are experienced against the Gudra archetype. Are you quite happy to see that in the finals compared to other decks around?
That's the interesting part about Arc Duraludon. There's actually not too much that you're happy with or not happy with, because it's like the deck itself, like the strength just lies in being super like consistent in terms of what you want to do. Like you don't have a lot of things that you need to worry about. You don't need to worry about getting Archeops into your discard pile. You don't have a lot of counters thrown at you, like special energy hate, item lock, those kind of things you don't care about. But then there's also matchups, like every matchup is very even, because even something like Reggie's, which is like purely special energy based, they have so many paths, so it's like, it's still an interesting matchup. Lugia, still, in most cases anyways, has Vacuum and Eviltal. So you're at least forced usually into getting 2 Duraludons with 2 Parasols, or you have to like boss an Archeops early, boss the Eviltal early, stuff like that. So no matchups really like favorable, unless obviously there's literally like some niche deck that doesn't play Path and just plays only special energies. Like that would be one of those, but that just isn't around right now. So.
Yeah, only Tord likes to cut his tech cards for Arceus Duraludon, and that's one of the ways how you've reached the final. We're going to let you prepare now, get back into the right mental space for your finals match. Thanks so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
And we're going to a quick break.